talking about what focal dystonia is. So even now, if you get a diagnosis of focal dystonia, for a lot of musicians, that's a really traumatic experience.
It was horrible.
And
Me, yeah.
you know, and I love what you're doing, Joe, in terms of really communicating and spreading the word that it's not the end. You know, there is so much we can do in order to resolve the focal dystonia and come back. And most times come back to actually playing better and being more at ease with your music than
episode of Letting Go. Thank you to everyone who has liked and subscribed and shared all of this information. And if you are new to the channel, if you like this information, if you think that it's worthwhile and worth sharing, please like this video, share the video, and also subscribe to the channel for more content as well. And because this Letting Go initiative of mine is something that is very important to me, and it's something that grows along with me as well as I grow. And so as it is beneficial for you, it is also very beneficial for me as well to do this. And this fourth episode is extremely special because I am in conversation with an extremely special person to me, someone who has grown very dear to my heart, and who over several months helped me to gain the proper, not perspective, but proper perception. And that's really what the essence of this conversation, amongst all of the details that we talk about, that's really what this episode is about perception. And her name is Ruth Chiles, and she is a therapist that works with not just focal dystonia, but really any performance block. And she works kind of in the area of the deep brain, and you'll kind of get to see where this conversation goes and how all of this really applies. But just, again, there's going to be opinions on all sides of the table of this, but I invite you to open your minds because if you're not, I've already dubbed that the Dystonic Mentality, you know. And you're free to make up your mind, you know, but it's always good to see your options. You should definitely crave new information all the time and discern it. And there's a lot of relevance here. And I know that on a first-hand basis because during the whole quarantine and all that craziness, when I wasn't working, and by the way, I play full-time, okay? I perform full-time for one of the largest entertainment companies in the entire world. I perform full time, and when I had to go back to work, I wasn't sure where my mind was going to be. And when I got there, I was in a totally different place, a better place than I was before. It was absolutely insane, making this whole thing possible, making just even the concept of letting go possible to be able to pop in my brain. So enjoy this conversation between me and my wonderful friend, Ruth Chiles. Can you kind of tell me about like your style and yourself and kind of how you, just very brief, like how you came to do what you do and the way you do it?
Okay, that's very briefly. It's a long story. It's sort
Yeah,
of a
I
little mess.
know.
It was kind of like a life's work.
I know, right?
But there are some really key aspects to it.
Okay.
One of those is that as a child, I started to play music when I was about 3 years old because I found my brother's recorder and picked it up, and nobody could take it out of my hands after that point, and just loved, just it was just my absolute passion. And then went through a very strict classical musical training. And by the time I was 18, at that point, I was playing the clarinet, which was an instrument that I wanted to play. And by the time I was 18, I would just go into a panic attack just by looking at the clarinet. And so I completely lost my whole relationship with music. I didn't understand what music was any longer. I certainly didn't understand what I was playing, and just had this, and just felt the sense of panic constantly around music and around the musical instrument. And what was happening in parallel to that was that I couldn't control these muscles by the side of my mouth any longer. And the air would just come out. Now, at that point, I mean, we're talking a long time ago now. At that point, I don't think anybody had even coined the term focal dystonia, or certainly it wasn't in any kind of recognized medical or non-medical recognition of it.
Right.
So, my teachers were just like, try harder, train more, what's going on? Like, we kind of, like, it was very much that it was something I was doing wrong. And so I just stopped playing.
I'm sure adding to
That's
the trauma too.
Right. Right. Absolutely.
I mean, you're just like, yeah. I remember because before I found that idea of what that was, it was like, really, I mean, you almost don't know which one is more messed up, like not knowing that there's something that you can do, or the harder you try, that the worse it gets, or once you actually get a title for it, then that's tough. Yeah,
exactly. And it's, I mean, even today, these times it's tough because so much of them, certainly the medical information, but so much information on the internet about focal dystonia is, it's not curable, it's the musician's cancer, find another job, and this very, very negative. So yes, it was a really tough time, and the teacher I had at that point was a highly critical, perfectionistic teacher. So I would go, and I'm sure that was part of the reason why at that point the focal dystonia expressed itself. So I can remember going to my classes just with this awful feeling in my heart of having to spend another hour of having somebody going, that's not right, this is not right, that sounds wrong, you're not working hard enough, you're not trying hard enough. If you tried harder, your music would be better. And of course, then once the focal dystonia it started at the beginning of that process, and so that just got worse. The criticism got stronger. You should try harder, because before it got to a point where I couldn't play any longer, there was a process in which my embouchure was deteriorating.
Yeah. I can imagine. Yeah, because that actually kind of reminded me of my experience without me kind of realizing. Like, I noticed, like, for me, it was these hands, or these fingers, and I noticed a progression. And it was, obviously I didn't notice it up to a certain point, but then there was definitely a point when I was like, these are dipping. And so I just kind of like, okay, well, I just kind of played in my head, and I didn't know why. And then, certain forces that were kind of my everyday, didn't help that situation. And so, but I didn't know that anything was interlinked at all. I just noticed that these keep on going and going until finally one day, very similar to your story, you notice that progression. And then I just woke up with my hand like that. And that day is burned into my brain. Of that feeling, knowing that I have to do something about this. And then that's when I started, I think I went to the chiropractor a couple days later, and then I asked him about this. Oh, okay, it's just some nerves. So he goes and does,
Mm,
tore up some muscle and everything or whatnot. And no, it was still,
yeah,
just happening. It
yeah,
was a reaction.
yeah,
It wasn't
yeah.
anything to do with anything exterior, most
Mm,
definitely.
mm,
Um,
mm, mm,
and so,
mm,
yeah, so I can, that reminded me about that when you said there was definitely a
mm,
progression, you know,
mm,
because that my progression of, eventually finally got to a
mm.
pinnacle, and obviously
Yes,
that's when
yeah,
we met and everything. So,
yeah,
but yeah,
yeah,
there's definitely
yeah.
a progression. If for
Mm,
those that are watching this, you can probably think back, even if it felt like one day you woke up and it was there,
mm,
you can
mm.
probably kind of
Yeah,
start to realize that there's a little trail, definitely, and that's a good
yes,
thing to
yeah,
notice, I think.
yeah. I think so too. I
Yeah.
think so
So
too.
sorry to interrupt. No, but I just
No, no, that's great. So I think that left a hole. I mean, when I look back, I mean, it kind of was almost like I felt like it left a hole in my soul or a hole in my life.
Mm-hmm.
But I continued on, um, changed ideas about what I wanted to do with my work and with my life, and actually I ended up working in the banking system. Now, this is a long time ago. This is before coaching existed. This is before any kind of performance work existed, and I suppose maybe that whole led me to somewhere unconsciously have a desire to understand what makes performance fall over in general.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was working in the banking system and got involved in a strategic project and around how can the bank achieve its 10-year results. And the part that I got involved in was how can we enable senior managers to be leaders and performers.
Mm-hmm.
And so I then just started to research around performance, but because it's before the performance world existed,
Right.
I was like, that was kind of really open. And so I started to research creativity, neuroscience,
Mm-hmm.
the nervous system, so stuff that actually today isn't very much included in what is performance work,
Right. Right.
and took it from there. Then one of my colleagues was a psychologist who was working with the female Olympic track team.
Huh.
And he said, that strange stuff that you're doing with senior managers, do you think that might work for athletes as well? And I was like, well, we can try it. Let's see, and so we started to apply the same things we were doing to the track athletes, and it worked really, really well.
Oh, that's cool.
And so that then just launched me. Then from that point, I was just, would get phone calls, and I left the bank and would have phone calls around, can you help with my performance? Specifically from athletes, worked with a lot of basketball players, skiers, a whole range of sports people. But my passion has always been music.
Right.
But as I began to learn about performance blocks, and I started also to work on my own performance blocks, then the dystonia piece came in, because when I worked with a basketball player who had focal dystonia, it was never diagnosed, but it had focal dystonia in his foot, and he suddenly couldn't do any jump shots. So he'd gone from like a 60% accuracy on his jump shots to a 0.
Right. So he could just to be clear, so he could run and dribble, but then when it came to the point of the jump shot, that's when he would falter.
His toes would do this.
Oh, okay.
And so that would shoot him forward, so he couldn't
Right.
get the ball in the net.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Yeah, no, definitely.
And so I was working with the team in general that he was playing in, and one day he approached me. He said, I'm really embarrassed about this situation, and I just don't know what to do. Do you think there's something that you can help? Is there something you can help me with? I didn't even know. I still didn't have the term focal dystonia by that point.
Right.
Right. So I just treated it as I would treat any other thing where the body is not responding in the way that we would expect it to respond, which for me is based on adverse events that have occurred. Just before this had occurred, he'd had an injury. So there were two things that happened. One was he moved from Croatia to Spain, and it was, he'd spent his whole career playing in one team, and he came over to Spain, and just like suddenly a new country, new team. He'd received bullying in his other team with the coach.
Okay. Yeah.
Which is one of the reasons why he left and came to Spain.
Right.
And in the pre-season friendlies, as he jumped to put the ball into the net, as he came down, the defender from the other team pushed into him, and he tripped and he broke some bones in his foot.
Oh, okay.
Right. The doctors couldn't understand what was happening. Obviously, they said, your foot is fine. Physiologically, your foot is perfectly fine. We don't understand why the toes are cramping. So I just went, Croatia. I asked him how old he was when the war began there. And he was a baby, and so there was a small child. He lived his first 7 years in war.
Interesting.
Wow. So I just started to go, like everything I work, this is about adverse events and the impact in the nervous system. And that injury is the bit in the nervous system that just went boom. That's the straw that broke the camel's back.
Right.
So I work with him from that place, and very, very quickly, the feet certain parts of the body are much quicker to resolve than others. The fingers are the hardest because the fingers are so integrated across the whole of the brain. And it didn't take us long, and he was back, and his percentages were even higher than they had been before. So then several other basketball players that also had focal dystonia began to call me up.
Interesting. Wow.
The basketball world is very small. So they began to phone me up, continued to work, and still didn't have the term focal dystonia. And then I was asked to give a conference at a music conservatory. And one of the things I talked about, I was talking about when the body doesn't respond. And one of the things I was talking about were these cases within basketball. And one of the teachers came up after the class, and he said, what you're talking about is focal dystonia. I have focal embouchure dystonia. I've had it for however many years. It was a long, long number of years. Nobody's been able to resolve it for me. I've been to this place, this place, this place. So he gave me the list of all the treatments. And he said, do you think you could help me? And I was like, I think so. Asking some questions, what was your childhood like? Well, it was really tough. And my mother, I think his mother had some mental illness issues, and so we started to then find these adverse events that were going on, and that was where I worked with him.
Okay.
And he
just,
was
sorry, just before you continue, I want to make sure I understand. So at this point, were you already in the process of taking care of your own? Or was it still kind of like I'm like making that connection? Oh, this is what I have.
Well, at that point, I'd already resolved my own issues.
Oh, okay. So this was okay. All right. So
this came afterwards. Yeah.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure I understand.
So I think there's something for me that was like a divine gift, which was that I began to work on the resolution of focal dystonia without having the label for it.
Right. Okay.
So if you don't have a label, you have complete freedom to, it's not in a box.
Exactly.
So when I started to work on what was going on with my embouchure, I started to work through all my own traumatic events, adverse events, so on and so forth. And I just worked through all of that with myself and with my therapist. I was kind of guiding my therapist to say, with the brain spotting that I work, to say, okay, this is the issue. Will you support me with the brain spotting whilst we do that? And I'd got to the point where, I was playing perfectly. I'd moved across to the flute by that point, but when I first picked up the flute, I couldn't even feel my embouchure in terms of being able to play. I couldn't play at all. And so I'd worked through all of that then before I even had the label of what was going on.
Okay, cool.
So that was great. So it was lovely working with this musician with the embouchure dystonia, and at the end of that he said to me, please continue this work. and please begin to reach out to other musicians and let them know. And then, of course, through him, you know, he started to talk about with other musician friends that he had, and that was then how really then this whole way of working and working. I work almost exclusively now with musicians.
Right.
That's how it kind of happened. It found me rather than me finding it.
Right. That's amazing, and that's kind of I think a way where you know you're in the right place is you seem to find you most definitely. Oh yeah,
absolutely, yeah.
Because you're not forcing anything, you know, which is really how we should. It seems like that's kind of how we should go about things in general.
Right, absolutely,
you know?
yeah.
So,
and it feels, and you know, this is so vocational for me. And
right,
that's
yeah,
when you
exactly.
know that you're doing what you know God put you on the planet to do.
Yeah, exactly,
Right.
exactly.
Yeah.
So then that being said, that's perfect actually for my next question. So, what is there a major difference between the way you think about how you work with people with focal dystonia, and what is it that makes it so effective? I mean, because I know with my experience with you, it was confusing in the beginning, you know.
Right.
But it was also, I remember, you know, telling my wife when I would get out of the session with you, like I just felt, just plain and simple, even after the first time, second time, I just felt good. I felt relieved, you know. And there were tears through some of those, you know. And but I, you know, and I don't know if it was just as simple as I had never let that go, or I had never, I don't know what it was, but every single time that we would meet, even if I didn't understand, I would still feel lighter, you know.
Right.
And so is that from the therapeutic aspect of it, or I mean, how does that interplay into the beginnings of resolving focal dystonia?
Okay, so for me, focal dystonia is neurophysiological, but not in the way that most people think about it. Okay, so it's not and we know that it's not neurophysiological in the way most people think about it, because how can it be that I can do every task and my hand, for some people, for other people it's not, but I can do all the tasks, I can move my hand perfectly normally until I pick up my musical instrument. So it can't be that the motor centers of the brain are damaged.
Right.
Because if that was the case, everything that I did, my hand would respond in the same way. Right. So this is the understanding that I came to. Adverse events, they have a neurophysiological impact on the deep part of the brain, which means that they become kind of encapsulated in the brain because the brain hasn't been able to process them properly. And what they do is they create a threat response in the nervous system. So Stephen Porges, who's an American neuroscientist, developed this amazing theory called the polyvagal theory. And so it's a much more complete way of talking about the threat response in the nervous system. Okay. And then there's a psychologist called Deb Dana who has taken that work, and she has really been able to explain it in a very accessible way around how the nervous system can either be in safe mode or in threat mode, in survival mode. And when the nervous system is in survival mode, that's caused by these events that have happened to us. We haven't been able to resolve them. So the nervous system is constantly looking for when the next adverse event is going to happen.
Right.
It's kind of like on edge all of the time. Okay. And so what happens when the nervous system is in threat mode is it pre-prepares, it primes most of the key muscles through the body. Okay. And specifically, it's going to prime the muscles of the hand and of the jaw and the mouth.
Right.
Okay. So it's doing it in terms of preparation for defense in the here and now, in terms of, you know, this is my defense, or the bite defense, the growl defense.
Right.
Okay. There's also things happening in the neck because the eyes will automatically lock onto where it thinks the predator is. Now, bear in mind, a predator doesn't feel the human brain. Doesn't need to be a physical predator. It can be an emotional predator or a mental predator.
Right.
So my teacher didn't mean to do that, but when she was constantly criticizing me, my brain emotionally and mentally was going, I'm under threat. Okay, and was having a threat response to that.
Absolutely, yeah. Because we don't want that.
We don't want that, and it feels terrible on the inside, right?
Exactly, right.
So, but then it goes back even more to an even more primary response. Our most basic primary survival responses are hyperextension of the fingers and a hypercontraction of the fingers. And then it's the suckling movement in the mouth and the tongue and the breath response.
Right.
Okay. So it became, when I was working with myself on what was happening with my umbilical dystonia, and I did have stuff in my hands. It didn't come as far as being dystonic in my fingers, but there was a sense of contraction in my hands that was accompanying this.
Right.
And so actually,
but I'm just noting connections also, because that's one of the things too, is I think that people can think, oh, I have umbilical dystonia. There's, this guy is a string player. There's nothing I can pull. And then also, same thing with string players. There's nothing I can pull from somebody with umbilical. But there are so many connections, and I noticed I get not the opposite, but I guess the inverse of that. So I started, obviously my main issues here, but as I progressed through, this was before we met, I started feeling my lips quiver and or even contract at some points, even just with tuning. There were moments, and I was like, whoa, that's not. And it was starting to be kind of consistent. So it's so connected. It's the same issue,
it's the same issue.
But it seems like it manifests in I don't know why it manifests where it does, but it seems like it manifests where the most sense of, I guess, strain is, and it gives up. Maybe it gives up that or something like that.
Yes.
But I don't mean to interrupt, but I just know.
No, but it's great, and it's really good that you do that, because I'm sure that people who are then watching this conversation, that helps light up some. Oh yeah. Oh, I can really relate to that. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And the breath holding as well. I work with, I would say most of the hand dystonia people that I've worked with, there's some breath holding issues going on.
Yeah. And I noticed that later. Yeah.
So that was where I approached one with my own resolution. That this is about how can we bring the nervous system back into safety, and that's about working with the deep brain to release all these capsules, which are the events that have happened over life. We can't get there through talk therapy because the talk centers are too high up in the brain. The main tool that I use with that is brain spotting, so the optic nerve. So when I talked about, the eyes lock where they think the predator is, that means that where the optic nerve reaches into the deep brain, that chooses the neural network where that information is stored. And I always encourage people to explore this. Where we look affects the way we feel. Okay, so and we instinctively know that. So we instinctively know that if somebody asks me what happy feels like, and I want to feel into kind of a happy open heart, my eyes go there in order to feel it.
Right.
And if I start to remember something that's stressful, a stressful moment, and I start to feel the stress in my body, in order to feel the stress in my body, my eyes have to go somewhere else.
Right. Yeah.
And in fact, I'm sure you had this experience when we were brain spotting, that because we've done that where we've set up two eye positions, right?
Right.
And you'd look over there and you go, wow, I can really feel my body reacting to that. And then I'd go, now look over here, and you'd look over here and you go, it's just calmed.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's the way brain spotting works. And
Yeah.
it gets right into the memories and into the feelings that are associated with that encapsulated memory.
Yeah.
And the brain works through it. It becomes
Mhm.
reintegrated in the brain. And then you have that sense of lightness afterwards. Oh, I feel like a weight's been lifted off my shoulders.
Right. Yeah,
So the
exactly.
way,
Yeah. And that's how it would come out. I would just feel
mm,
like I had I, it was like almost a new feeling for me. It had been
yes,
so long, I guess, maybe, or I wonder even ever sometimes,
yeah, yeah,
since maybe like early childhood that I
yeah,
felt that I was like, maybe this is, and to me, it was just like a relief. And especially at the beginning, it was a relief to come
mm,
out feeling like that. But at the same time,
mm,
it was still kind of like, well, that's great. That's a relief, but that's just not normal until
mm,
finally I realized when I went back to work after
mm,
our first set of
mm,
sessions that
mm,
I was like, why, and I was kind of nervous about how I was going to go back.
mm, mm,
Because again, I hadn't played. This was during all the quarantining and stuff. I hadn't played
mm,
in months and
mm.
all that.
Yeah,
And so there's some anticipation. And even with
yeah,
that regular, I come to realize now, healthy
mm,
sense of anticipation and totally relevant, I
yeah,
can I can give myself that much at least,
yes,
that I went back and I was like, I don't I don't feel that edge anymore.
yeah,
I don't,
yeah,
and it was
yeah.
so new to me. And then I thought, and I thought back to, coming out, feeling that sense of lightness. I'm like, why can't that be normal? Why is
Mm,
it that can't
mm,
be normal? Just that's
mm.
that's just how we need to function. It doesn't mean that you're
Right.
not going to be ready for threat. It just means that threat isn't always at your door all the time.
Absolutely. That's it. I love that way of describing it. That
You
threat
know?
isn't always at your door all the time.
Yeah.
And we actually physiologically were prepared for threat.
Hmm.
So just to give you a bit of science,
Okay.
we have what's called a vagal brake. Okay, so the vagus nerve is what creates the flight, fight, or collapse response to threat. Okay, it's the system that will go, okay, I can get myself out of this dangerous situation,
Uh-huh.
right? Um, and and we have a brake on it, meaning that it's almost like if you're going downhill on a bicycle,
Hmm.
you've got the brakes kind of
Oh, right.
there,
Yeah. Uh-huh.
half on all the time,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
right? And you can release the brake a little bit, but it's
Hmm.
always ready to be pulled back on.
Right.
And that's in a way what happens with the nervous system. So normal really is being relaxed and free
Hmm.
and not feeling threatened.
Hmm.
Normal is the brake being on,
Hmm.
which means that in an instant the brake can be released
Right.
and we can respond to threat.
Hmm.
It's so fast. And in fact, our ability to respond to threat is happening at 11 million bits of information per second.
Okay.
So that's how fast we can respond to threat.
Hmm.
Okay. And that's always there. So we don't need to kind of hold this,
Right.
this prepared, this alert
Hmm.
all the time,
And
because we are going to respond healthily if we need to.
right. And would you say that might be the reason why focal dystonia can be so hard to resolve, because it is that powerful, or the threat
Yep.
response is that fast and is that powerful?
Yes. Yeah.
So it's not like we're just trying to get rid of something that weighs, like less than a pound. I mean, we're really trying to get rid of something that is extremely powerful, or not get rid of
Yes.
it, but we're trying to remove something that is extremely powerful already in
Yes.
and of itself.
Yeah.
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 So,
And the basic, one of the basic functions of our brain is to keep us safe.
hmm.
Survival is one of the most basic functions of the brain. So, we're wired for survival. So if we've got survival issues
Yeah.
in the deep brain, and we talk about the deep brain, so our thinking bit of the brain, our conscious brain is up here, and this is going on down here, and sometimes right into the brainstem,
Hmm.
right? So it's a long way away from the thinking brain, and it's
Right.
working at this speed. Now, our thinking brain is working at 10 to 60 bits of perceptual information per second,
Mm-hmm.
compared with 11 million.
Right.
So
Yeah.
that's why when we consciously go to our hand, we'll relax.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that's like little 60 things going against 11 million.
Right.
Of course it doesn't work.
Right.
Which is why it's so frustrating. Then it's happening in the subcortex. We don't have conscious awareness of what's going on there,
Mm-hmm.
which is why it seems so baffling as
And
well, and so frustrating.
and this is the place where you work essentially, right? Is down here, and
Yes.
and let me ask you this, and I know the last time we talked, we were talking about you know, and the way I've kind of noticed just on an outside level are babies and how babies learn and how babies develop, and when they learn to walk, they're not quite, you know, conscious of all of those things. I mean, so I'm assuming that they're working from somewhere down there, and all
Right.
of that stuff gets stored down in the deep area of the, like, just general
Absolutely.
movement, walking, how to
Yes.
open and
Yeah.
close hands and all that
Yeah.
kind of thing. Just
Yeah.
natural movement. That's where that
Yeah.
all exists.
Exactly.
And so if somebody can think about how natural walking is to them, or how natural just opening your hand and grabbing something is to them, you know, that's essentially what our instruments should be. And
Right.
if you think about the way a baby learns, they feel no pressure to walk by
Absolutely.
this amount of time, or
Absolutely.
same thing with potty training,
Yeah.
you know, which is why a baby to a degree can't be forced to potty
Yeah.
train, or shouldn't be,
Right.
you know, because that develops naturally. It should develop naturally.
Yes.
I mean, there's so many things
Yeah.
so, you know, playing an instrument should develop naturally,
Yes.
with a healthy amount of pressure, understanding that, you know, X, Y, and Z need to be done, but also very naturally. But then
Yes.
also, I think too, making this connection, resolving dystonia should also feel natural and come at a natural pace and not be forced. I mean, would you agree with that?
I would completely agree with that, because if we're talking about this being in the safe part of our nervous system, by definition, that's natural and it's not
Right.
forced.
Right.
As soon as we're forcing something, we're then in survival mode.
Right.
And you know, when we talked about, you know, the dystonia isn't just in these fingers. You know, we notice it, you know, in other parts of the body. We actually notice it in the way our mind works and in the way our emotions work.
Exactly.
You know,
Yeah.
and so, you know, I see the same patterns of thinking, the same patterns of feeling over and over and over again.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I also see that once we've worked through the survival and we've brought the nervous system into safety, that thinking and those emotions are completely different.
Right. Right. And I've talked about it before on letting go, where essentially the dystonic mentality, and that's really like one of those things that's that has to go, that has to disappear.
Yeah.
Because I know one of the things when when trying to resolve it, you know, especially now that you see more cases are being resolved, which is a good thing, but you start to look at time frame, because you're desperate, you want to heal, right?
Right.
So
Right.
like, you like, okay, this guy, you know, it took him 2 years, and this guy took him 6 months, and how do I do the 6 months, you know? Put me on the 6 month
Right.
track, you know, or put me on
Yes. Yeah.
and then, or this guy, you know, he's getting better, but he's been working at it for 7 years, and a lot of times we can put that pressure, or that, like, I don't, you know,
Yes.
the timeline thing. And to me, I mean, you have to, everybody has a different life, everybody has a different ability to handle stress, everybody has a different ability for
Yeah.
all of that kind of thing. So
Yeah.
so to put that type of pressure on yourself is self-defeating in the
Yes.
purpose of what you're doing, which is trying to
Yeah.
heal, you know.
Exactly.
So
Exactly.
yeah. Hello, everybody, and welcome to this episode's exercise. And this one is really cool. It's really easy, and I'm just kind of have developed this pretty recently, so I'm still practicing on it. But I wanted to share it with you because it is so easy and so quick. So it's very simple. It's if you remember back to the first exercise I showed you, this one, where it was the hand and then you just kind of let it go very slowly, right? It's kind of like the more intricate and advanced version of that. Okay. And again, this is all just about perception. It's about what you're feeling, taking that information in, and just letting yourself see what's going on. There's no rush, there's no force, there's no major intent in doing anything, there's no pressure or stress in this exercise whatsoever. You want to give your body time to take note and then give your body time to respond properly. And that's it. Okay. And so it helps not just the physical motion, okay, but it also helps your ability to just chill out. All right. And you can do this anywhere because like I said before, all you need is a pen or a pencil. And essentially what you're going to do is you're going to put this on the tip of your thumb, and then you're going to put this under the tips of your fingers like that. Okay. And you're just going to check your motion. That's it. You're not going to think too hard about it. Okay, you don't want to be sloppy with it. It's not like that. But you're just going to feel into your motion. Okay? You can move your thumb around like this. Again, you want to be in such a neutral position that you can be very mobile with everything. Okay? And just perceive. Just feel. How mobile are you? Okay? How intricate can you make these movements? You know? Lift your fingers. And you may do this on one day and you may feel one way, and then you may do this on another day and you may feel slightly different. Is that not just every day, right? That's okay. Okay? You can do different finger combinations. Okay? And then it also helps you with your balancing, right? You may have to adjust your balancing, but you only want to do what is necessary. And this is why I say, so now I'm going to show you this. Okay? So I'm going to go ahead and lift all fingers except for one. Yep. So if you notice, this finger is starting to really raise up high. But then look at how much more I can move it down. You see? So that is an overcompensation right there. My body perceives that it can't do it without moving this finger high. What that creates is tension. You see? So that's something that I notice with time. So because that has become a kind of a subconscious habit. So now I'm going to try it again. And see, I can perform the same motion without utilizing all of that ridiculous movement and tension. That's tension. All the way back here. That's an overuse of my extensor muscle. Okay? Now, look at that. See, I've also had the same trouble when I try and balance my pinky. The same thing would happen. But it's interesting how the body is so efficient. It's amazing, guys, that just from learning that, I'm able to do that without this doing the same thing. You see? And so, and again, just kind of check where you're at. And that's essentially the basic idea of the exercise, okay? Now, the cool thing about this is that depending on what type of hand dystonia, this is going to, and mentally, this would be good for embouchure dystonia, I'm assuming. Mentally, learning that patience, learning that idea of what it is to perceive something. Just perceive it. Take it for what it is. And then give yourself time for the proper response and get that to be a natural motion as opposed to, the defense right away, or the immediate reaction right away, okay, or the anticipation of something. That's one of the worst things for dystonians, is the anticipation of something, right? This sets that back in the proper order. So you're using motion as kind of an emotional treatment as well, okay? So you're using, I said that right? You're using motion to help your emotion, okay? Now, so what I was going to mention, so for those of you with hand dystonia, this is a cool exercise because the kind of the neutral position is like this, okay? But you can also turn your hand around so that you can kind of see from another angle, and also gives you another certain perception, okay? You can do this for left-hand dystonia or for right-hand dystonia. Violinists, you can put it up into more or less playing position and then do the same thing and kind of see where also your tendencies to want to go to the extreme to not drop it happen, and see where you can find the neutrality point, okay? Or the neutral point. Guitarists, if you have right hand dystonia, also very cool. You know, you do it in your right hand, exactly the same exercise that I showed you, okay? You can do it up like this just to start with, just to get the idea of it. Then you can put it into your pick hand motion, okay? So, and obviously this would be for classical guitarists, okay? Not if you have like, I guess, pick hand dystonia, I guess you'd call it. But if you're a classical guitarist and you have it in your fingers here, just turn that over and then do the exact same exercise, okay? And I would recommend whatever hand you have dystonia in, just do it in that hand in all different forms and see where that tension is in any position. But that's really it. That's the entire exercise. It's a really cool one. Again, have fun with it. No pressure, no time constraint. No, I mean, it's literally just giving yourself time to set that back in order rather than anticipating, which comes from the inside out. It's giving yourself time to perceive and then respond to the stimulus. And that's it. Okay. Again, have fun and let go. Bye. We'll see you. Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for joining me on this episode of Letting Go. And of course, I thank you for your support through this journey of focal dystonia. And please like and subscribe, and of course, share the message. And stay tuned for future episodes, methods, lessons, and thoughts. We'll see you soon. God bless.